Welcome to Should Have Known It, where we present 15-minute videos of things you definitely should have known. Hi, welcome to Shoulda Known It. I'm MS Aoki, and today's topic is the one idea that dissolves most anxiety. The opening line of the Enchiridion, which just means handbook, the thing you keep in your hand, goes like this: some things are in our power, while others are not. That's it. That's the whole apparatus. But the Greek word Epictetus uses for in our power is hemin, literally up to us, and the distinction he draws is far sharper than it looks. What is hemin? Your judgments, your impulses, what you pursue and what you avoid. Your opinions, your intentions, your responses to the world. These, Epictetus says, are by nature free, unhindered, unimpeded. They belong to you in a way that nothing external ever can. What is not heimin? Your body, your reputation, your property, whether the flight is delayed, whether the email gets a response, whether the person you love decides to stay. These are weak, slavish, subject to hindrance, not our own. And here's the thing, Epictetus will not let you soften. You must choose one category to care about because you cannot serve both. Notice what he did not say. He did not say external things don't matter. He did not say outcomes don't affect you. He's describing a logical structure. Anxiety is almost always the result of treating something in the second category as though it were in the first. When you catch yourself dreading an outcome you cannot control, you are making a category error, and category errors have remedies. Epictetus was not a comfortable man writing from a library. He was born into slavery, possibly in Hierapolis in modern-day Turkey, sometime around 50 CE. His master, a freedman named Epaphroditus, who worked for Nero, reportedly broke Epictetus's leg to test whether he would cry out. According to the story, Epictetus said calmly, "You're going to break it." Then, when it snapped, "Didn't I tell you?" He lived this philosophy before he taught it. That biographical detail matters because the dichotomy of control is not an abstract thought experiment, it was a survival technology. A slave cannot control what happens to his body. He cannot control when he is sold, to whom, or under what conditions. What Epictetus discovered was that this external helplessness, which seems like total defeat, actually clarifies the domain of freedom. You always retain the power to judge, to choose your attitude, to decide what you think something means. That interiority is the one thing that cannot be confiscated. Here is a question worth sitting with. If the framework was designed by someone who had literally no control over his physical circumstances, what does it say about how we use the framework today for commutes, performance reviews, and social media notifications? Either the philosophy scales down gracefully, or we are using a sledgehammer to crack an egg. I think it scales, but you should test that claim yourself. Think about the last thing you were genuinely anxious about. Not a vague background hum, a specific dread. Maybe it was a medical test result. Maybe it was a conversation you had to have and you didn't know how it would go. Maybe it was a performance, a deadline, a first impression. Now ask the Epictetan question, which part of that was actually hemin, the test result itself, not hemin. What you eat before the appointment, whether you show up, how you respond to whatever the result is, Haman, the outcome of the conversation, not EAP Haman. The honesty and care you bring to it. Haman, the audience's reaction to the performance, not Haman. The preparation, the intention, the execution, Haman. When you sort it this way, the anxiety doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It stops being a sprawling fog and becomes a very small, specific question. Am I doing what is mine to do? Here's the part that stops people cold. Epictetus argues that the suffering we experience from external events is not caused by the events themselves. It's caused by our judgment about the events. He writes, "It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about things." This idea didn't originate with Epictetus, he credits it to Socrates, but Epictetus gives it the sharpest edge. Your opinion is always eape Haman, which means every disturbance is at root something you're doing, not something being done to you. That last point tends to provoke real resistance. You're saying it's my fault I'm anxious? No, that is not what he's saying. Fault implies blame, and blame requires intention. What Epictetus is pointing at is location. The anxiety lives inside the judgment, not inside the event. That means the remedy is also inside the judgment. It's not accusation, it's opportunity. Marcus Aurelius, who came to Stoicism through different teachers but absorbed the same framework, gives us the clearest practical instruction in his Meditations, a private journal never intended for publication. Book 6, Entry 8. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This only makes sense inside the dichotomy. The obstacle itself is not iepe hemin. Your response to it is. So every obstacle automatically redirects you to the only domain that was ever yours. The practice Epictetus actually prescribes is called prohairesis choosing. Before you act, before you invest emotionally, you form a preference with an internal asterisk attached. I want this outcome, and it is not entirely in my power. In Latin, this becomes amor fati as Nietzsche later rephrased it, but Epictetus's version is more precise. It's not love your fate, it's form your intention clearly, attach it loosely. The attachment is the error. The intention is fine. Here's a number. The Enchiridion is 4,700 words long. That is shorter than most corporate memos. It contains no hedging, no footnotes, no qualifications for edge cases. Epictetus was dictating to students who would carry this into actual lives, trials, illnesses, exile, political upheaval. He made it compact on purpose. The idea fits in a sentence because it has to. You need to be able to recall it in the moment when it matters, not retrieve it from a bookshelf. The most common misreading of the dichotomy is to treat it as a permission slip for detachment. Nothing is in my control, so I'll stop caring about outcomes. That is exactly backwards. Epictetus is not counseling indifference, he is demanding precision. You should care intensely about everything that is EAP Amen. Your judgments deserve your full attention. Your character is the one project you're working on for your entire life. The dichotomy is not a release valve, it is a targeting system. A second misreading. Other people's behavior is not in my control, so I shouldn't bother trying to influence them. Also wrong, you can argue, persuade, model, teach, love. All of those actions are e-ape he Haman. What is not Eve Haman is the result of those actions. You may teach a student beautifully and they may still not learn. The teaching is yours. The learning is theirs. The Stoic doesn't stop teaching. They stop making their peace of mind contingent on the result. And a third misreading, subtler than the others, people apply the framework retroactively. After the failure, after the loss, they say, well, that was out of my control. But Epictetus means the sorting to happen prospectively before you act. Before you invest, used retroactively, it becomes rationalization. Used prospectively, it becomes clarity. The timing is the whole difference between a philosophy and an excuse. Let me give you the actual sorting method. Before any significant undertaking, a difficult conversation, a job application, a health decision, you mentally divide the situation into two columns. Column 1, what I can fully determine. Column 2, what I can influence but not determine, or cannot affect at all. Then you put your energy entirely into column 1 and form what Epictetus calls a reserved wish about column 2. I prefer this outcome, understanding it is not mine to guarantee. Column 1 is almost always smaller than you think, and almost always enough. In the difficult conversation, you can prepare what you want to say. You can choose when and where to have it. You can decide to be honest and kind. You can listen carefully. That is a substantial column. You cannot determine how the other person responds. That is the whole of column 2. Most of our pre-conversation suffering lives in column 2. We are rehearsing their responses, gaming out their reactions, dreading outcomes we have no column 1 access to. Here is what this looks like as a daily practice, reported by people who've attempted it seriously. William Irvine, a philosophy professor at Wright State University, documented his own year-long experiment with Stoic practice in his 2009 book, A Guide to the Good Life. He describes sorting his goals into internal goals, things entirely within his control, and external goals. For a tennis match, his external goal was to win. His internal goal was to play to the best of his current ability. He found that the internal goal, consistently pursued, produced better external results anyway, and removed almost all of the pre-match anxiety. There are places the dichotomy strains. Grief is the most important one. When you lose someone you love, the Stoic framework can feel obscene, as though the philosophy is telling you not to feel what you feel. But Epictetus lost students, and Seneca lost his son, and Marcus Aurelius lost 5 of his children. They grieved. The framework does not prohibit grief. It asks you to notice the difference between missing someone, which is a natural response to reality, and the belief that reality should have been otherwise, which is a judgment you're making and can examine. The Stoics called this distinction eupathia I, good emotions, as opposed to passions that stem from false judgments. Grief rooted in love is a good emotion. Rage at the universe for operating as the universe operates. That is a false judgment dressed as a feeling. You can mourn a person and simultaneously not believe the universe owes you their permanent presence. Both things are available. The framework is precise enough to hold them both without collapsing. But I want to be honest, there are situations where almost nothing is efhemen. Serious illness in which the body does not cooperate with any intention. Systemic injustice that absorbs individual effort without yielding. These are the hard cases, and the Stoics knew it. Epictetus was a slave. His answer was not that the system was fine, it was that even inside systems of total external constraint, the interior remained. That is not a full answer to injustice. It is a note about where the self can still be found. Here's a fact about the dichotomy that most introductions leave out. It is radically asymmetric in the effort it requires. Controlling what is ephemen, your judgments, intentions, responses, is extraordinarily difficult. It requires constant practice, honest self-examination, and the willingness to catch yourself in the middle of a false judgment and redirect. Epictetus says explicitly that the person who practices this must expect to be laughed at, to seem odd, to appear to others as though they don't care about the right things. Meanwhile, the things that are not ephemen have a way of consuming almost all human attention, across almost all cultures, across recorded history. Status, wealth, reputation, the behavior of others, the way things turn out. These fill our attention not because we chose them, but because they are loud and immediate and social. The dichotomy asks you to do something deeply counter-instinctual, to withdraw energy from the category that shouts and invest it in the category that whispers. That is the practice. It doesn't get easier because you understand it. Epictetus gives a clarifying image in chapter 2 of the Enchiridion. He compares the philosopher's work to a wrestler. A wrestler does not train by avoiding opponents. They train by becoming harder to throw. Every time you notice you're disturbed by something outside your control and redirect your attention inward, you are training. You are getting harder to throw. That's the whole arc. There is no graduation. There is only the practice getting slightly more reliable over time. I want to return to the opening sentence, because now it carries more weight than it did when we met it. Some things are in our power, while others are not. When Epictetus dictated this to Arion, his student, the one who actually wrote the Enchiridion down, he was delivering the highest leverage sentence he knew. Not a long argument, not a system of proofs. One binary cut through all of human experience. What makes it so durable is that it doesn't require any metaphysical commitments. You don't have to believe in fate or providence or Stoic physics, all of which Epictetus did believe in. You just have to be honest in any given moment about which column you're in. Is this thing ephemen or not? The question is available to atheists, to people in crisis, to people who have never read a word of philosophy, to children. It fits in a moment because it has to. And here's the final, deepest implication, the one that takes the longest to absorb. If your suffering is located in your judgments, and your judgments are ephemen, then you're never quite as powerless as you feel. The situation may be catastrophic, the outcome may be terrible, but you retain always the capacity to decide what you think it means and how you will meet it. That capacity is not nothing. For Epictetus, it was everything. Here is the practice in its simplest form, because philosophy that doesn't change behavior is just atmosphere. When you notice anxiety or distress arising, not later, not in retrospect, right then, ask, what am I trying to control that isn't mine to control? You don't need to answer it immediately. You just need to ask it with genuine curiosity rather than rhetorical resignation. The question is the practice. Irvine's recommendation, which I find sensible, is to internalize your goals one level. Instead of I want to give a great presentation, try I want to prepare as thoroughly as I can and deliver it as clearly as I can. The second formulation contains everything you can actually guarantee, and it leaves out the one thing, the audience's response, that was never yours. You lose almost nothing. You gain enormous internal stability. 4,700 words of the Enchiridion have been in continuous circulation for nearly 2,000 years. They were translated into Armenian in the 5th century, used as a Christian monastic guide in the 6th, rediscovered during the Renaissance, and have never fully gone out of print. That persistence is not an accident. Something in that first sentence keeps turning out to be true for people across radically different circumstances. Not because Epictetus was infallible, he wasn't, but because the cut he made between what is ours and what is not turns out to be a real cut. And finding it, even approximately, is genuinely useful. That's the whole point of this room. That's enough for today. The Enchiridion is short. You could read the whole thing tonight, I'd recommend it. Take your time with the first chapter. Don't rush past the sentence to get to the examples. The sentence is the point. Good night. And that brings us to the end. Thank you for joining me and learning something new. Until next time, click like and subscribe.